You're learning this is brand new.
Yeah, things are very fluid. They're moving very quickly, but I am told that Pam Bondi has been officially fired. She's out of her role. Now, where she goes next, that is a question mark. I was told in the meeting or in the conversation President Trump had with Bondi yesterday, he floated the idea of a judgeship as a potential landing place for Bondi. And in the interim period, while they are figuring out who is going to take over as Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche will step into that role. So he will be serving in the interim.
Told the world the files were on her desk. She looked straight into the camera and promised answers. And then the most powerful law enforcement officer in America went completely silent. That silence just cost Pam Bondi everything. Trump fired his own attorney general. No warning, no press conference. Just a phone call, a quiet trip back to Florida, and a statement so polite it felt like a goodbye note written before the execution. But the real story isn't the firing. It's what she was supposed to deliver and never did.
About Bondi last night, saying Attorney General Pam Bondi is a wonderful person and she is doing a good job. The reason that I note that is that because when we saw Kristi Noem being fired, there was none of that kind of generosity of spirit when it came to President Trump. Now, just a reminder, Bondi has a very close relationship with Susie Wiles, the chief of staff. They're both political operatives in Florida. They kind of came up together, so they have a long-lasting relationship. But President Trump had grown increasingly frustrated about
Trump's first choice for attorney general. Matt Gaetz was. But Gaetz couldn't survive the confirmation process. So Trump needed someone clean, someone confirmable, someone who could walk into the Senate without starting a war. Bondi fit that profile perfectly. Florida attorney general, loyal, telegenic, connected. She looked like the safe option. She was anything but. The beginning of the end came in February, not with a scandal, not with a leak, but with a White House event that nobody asked for. Bondi walked in carrying binders, documents about Jeffrey Epstein's network. She presented them like they were classified, like they were new, like this was the moment the public had been waiting for. They weren't new. Those documents had been publicly available for years. Anyone could have found them, and the Attorney General of the United States apparently had no idea. The MAGA base never forgave her, and neither did Trump. Here's what makes this darker. There was no pressure on the administration to release anything at that moment. No public demand, no congressional investigation forcing their hand. Bondi created that expectation herself, on Fox News, on camera, and then couldn't follow through. She built the fire and handed people the matches. Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, one of Bondi's closest personal allies, went on record in Vanity Fair saying the DOJ had completely dropped the ball on the Epstein files.
Number of issues. One, didn't believe that some of the cases against his adversaries or political adversaries were being brought fast enough. He didn't believe that she had handled the Epstein files well, among other things. So we do know they had this conversation yesterday in which essentially President Trump told her that she was not long for this world, that he would eventually be replacing her. What we know now is that she has been officially fired. And again, Todd Blanche will step into that role as the Deputy Attorney General into an acting Attorney General role.
When your own allies are burying you in the press, the clock is already running out. Bondi tried everything to stay. Unlike previous officials who distanced themselves from Trump when they felt the temperature dropping, Bondi did the opposite. She stayed close, made herself visible, showed up.
Isn't political enough. Well, we saw Blanche taking a new role recently when he stepped out at CPAC and essentially said that everybody who had ever investigated Donald Trump or brought charges against him had been fired from the Department of Justice, making the Department of Justice clearly very political. And President Trump has liked what Todd Blanche has done. Blanche has always been kind of viewed as the person in the background making all of the mechanisms work. Now, of course, he'll be front and center, but it doesn't sound as though he's going to take this position long term, that they are going to still find a figurehead, so to speak, as the actual attorney.
Testified before Congress in a way that felt less like a cabinet official and more like someone begging to keep their seat. It didn't work. Trump spent the final week making personal calls to allies, asking who should replace her, what this would look like, whether she was worth saving.
Specifically when it came to the handling of the Epstein files. There was a big swath of people, and obviously we saw the Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, had said that in the interview with Vanity Fair when she said the Department of Justice whiffed on the Epstein files. There was a general feeling that that was the case, and they placed a lot of that blame on Pam Bondi, not on Kash Patel or on Dan Bongino, but on the Attorney General, because she was the one who was responsible for bringing in all of those influencers and giving them those binders, if we remember that from early in the administration. She was also the the one who said on Fox News that she has the Epstein files on her desk and she'd be releasing them soon. All things that put everybody into a tight spot and then caused enormous amount of problems down the road. But when it comes to actually replace,
The answer came back the same every time. And on the day he fired her, he issued a warm public statement calling her a wonderful person doing a good job. That wasn't kindness. That was Trump managing optics while the axe had already dropped.
Facing her, what we're told is that in January, this started becoming a real conversation, that the names started floating around as to who would potentially replace her. Now, that had died down a little bit, and then in the last week ramped back up. And I'll tell you, I was getting calls and text messages from people who aren't in the administration, who don't work at the White House, who were saying that they were hearing it. And they were hearing it because President Trump was making calls really starting on Monday, asking allies what they think about the fact that he might replace her, who should replace her, what does this actually look like? And that is when we really saw, obviously, all of
Todd Blanche, Trump's former personal defense attorney, now runs the Justice Department in an acting capacity.
Down. Bondi has taken the opposite tack. She has spent a lot more time with him. She's seemed to try to be more present as a way to ingratiate herself with the president. In the end, it did not work. And really, the original sin goes back to February of last year, when she orchestrated that event at the White House with these binders with documents that were years old. They'd been in the public sphere for years, and she didn't seem to know that. She didn't know that. And at that time, if you remember, the administration is new in office. There is really no constituency. There was nobody demanding the Epstein files. And she created this event out of nowhere. No one really was expecting that. And so they have not been able to live down that moment since. And the damage to the president because of that, I think, has been incalculable.
The man who stood at CPAC and declared that everyone who ever investigated Donald Trump had been fired from DOJ. That man is now in charge. And the Epstein files, still missing, still unresolved. The next attorney general will inherit every unanswered question, every broken promise, and every file that was supposed to be released. And
Mark Wayne Mullen, even if a senator happens to be chosen, and a few have been mentioned possibly, one is going to be very reluctant to accept this position because attorney general is different than every other position in the cabinet. And there's enough muscle memory now, beginning with Jeff Sessions, who could not be any more loyal initially until he fell out of favor because he recused himself. And that's something that the president still has in mind. He will choose someone who will never recuse themselves from anything. So I think that these confirmation hearings for the next attorney general will be dramatically different, largely because of what Evan was saying, everything that has been learned over the last year.
So tell me, if the most powerful lawyer in America couldn't open those files, or wouldn't, what exactly is in them? And who is powerful enough to keep them buried? Drop your answer below and subscribe to Starscope Daily, because we're just getting started.